Hello, everybody. Assalamu alaikum for the Arab region. This is Professor Abdullah. I am the General Supervisor for Naseej Academy, which is a non-for-profit initiative released by Naseej, which is a company just now more than 30 years. And now we are focusing in this initiative since we started 5 years ago to support and to give the awareness for the people who is related to library information science, learning, and also knowledge management. We used to have this webinar as a window that could give enlightenment on some of the hot topic in the field. And this night, because we are here in Saudi Arabia, so it's afternoon or almost night here. And this night we focusing on a request from different researchers who have a lot of interest on their process or journey to publish their manuscripts. Some of them just told us that we need to have insight from expert, from a member of editorial board about what we need to put it into our mindset to talk about, or also to think about or to follow regarding just having a smoothly process to publish our articles. Tonight, in this session, we are focusing about this flow of the processes, and for this flow, it's related to from practitioner to author, and this is opportunity to have this journal publishing specifically on the case of library trends, and also other journals in the field. That's why we are glad to have two of the really key figure in the field who is having long experience in this one. We are welcoming for sure you, the participant, and welcoming the two guests here. We have Clara, Professor Clara Chu, which is Director of Mortenson, Distinguished Professor at Mortenson Center in Illinois Urbana-Champaign University of Illinois of Urbana-Champaign, and also we have Professor Jaya, and both of them having a position as a chief editor and also as one of the key person who understand very well what needs to help the researcher to publish their paper. Again, Professor Clara and Professor Jaya, I will lay the stage for you just to introduce yourself in details and run this session, please.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, and thank you to Naseej Academy, and also a welcome from you from the co-sponsor, the Mortenson Center for International Library Programs at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. As Dr. Abdullah indicated, I am Clara Chu, and I also hold the position of co-editor-in-chief with my colleague, Jaya Raju.
Thank you, Clara. Colleagues, I'm Jaya Raju. I'm from the southern tip of Africa, Cape Town, the University of Cape Town, where I head an LIS school, and in our part of the world, we call it Knowledge and Information Stewardship. It is really a great pleasure to be a part of this engagement, and I would like to thank the Naseej Academy as well as the Mortenson Center for making me a part of this engagement. I really look forward to it.
Wonderful. So as I just finished typing, Jaya and I would welcome you to share with us, if you can type in English, where you're joining us from, which country, and also your affiliation. And that is so we can get to know you a little bit better. And so why don't we get started? Our session is focusing on from practitioner to author. opportunities for publishing in library trends and beyond. So as we indicated, we are the co-editors-in-chief of Library Trends, and we began this particular position starting this year. And we bring also experience from publishing either as authors as well as editors in other venues. And so it's going to be a great opportunity to share our experiences and really learn from you. And so I'm looking at the chat and I can see many of you joining from different parts, whether it's from the United States, I saw from Louisiana, and I'm also seeing from Morocco and even Los Angeles, San Jose. And so there are individuals from the United States as well as from the Arabian Gulf region, and I see Botswana, and I see Azerbaijan, and I see India and Venezuela. So hello to everyone. It's wonderful to have you here in this particular session where we are going to focus on the following objectives. So one is discuss why, when, what, where, and how to publish. The second would be to explore the journal's market. The third, to understand what makes a paper publishable. And then to introduce library trends as a source of journal publishing in the library and information field and how it is produced.
Thank you, Clara. This presentation is roughly divided into two, where I will speak initially about publishing in journals generally. And then against that backdrop and in that context, Clara will introduce library trends and how it works as an example of how a journal works in the scholarly communication terrain. So I would like to begin on why publish. And let's begin at the personal level. The first thing to say is to be able to publish is personally rewarding. It gives you that sense of progress that you have achieved, a sense of pride, not only in your personal development, but as well as in your professional development. And that is great motivation for publishing. Aside from that, it offers an opportunity for you to have a conversation in an area of your field, and in this case, the LIS field. And particularly an area where you are growing expertise and you've got a lot to share about. And in doing that, in participating in that engagement, in discourse and debate, you are contributing to your own intellectual growth. And in doing so, you are making a contribution at a wider level as well. You are contributing to the extension of the boundaries in the field that you are working in, specifically the LIS field. And then, of course, if we bring it in terms of why publish, if we bring it back to the personal level and also to the very practical level of where it builds your profile, it builds your CV. And apart from the fact that it gives you a sense of self-fulfillment to see your career grow and this being reflected in your CV, it puts forward for you promotional opportunities. You know, that is some of, you know, that is one very practical reason and motivation for getting involved in publishing. And at a high-end level, when you publish, you're also exposing yourself, exposing your work particularly in terms of the public domain. And for that, you get recognition. And all of us are involved in national or international contexts where it's wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to sit on policy councils, on professional body structures, structures within your institution, and even in governmental structures, because that gives you an opportunity to contribute to the growth of one's society. So publishing gives you that exposure so that you can be recognized for expertise in particular areas and be called on to serve what I would like to term public service positions in various structures within your institution as well as outside of your institution. So this brings us to the next question of when does one publish? And there's this common misnomer that you are only in a position to publish when you're quite established in your career. We would like to argue differently, that you should be in a position to publish early on in your career, if you are midway in your career, and of course, if you are established in your career. So what are some of the signs, or what are some of, what are some of the indicators that, you are in a position to publish? First of all, you might have established expertise in a particular area, and sometimes professionals are able to do this quite early in their careers as well. So nothing stops them from embarking on a publishing trajectory. You might have the good fortune of being engaged in a pioneering development, which you want to share with the world, which you want to share with your communities. So that is also an indicator that you could publish. You might be engaged in good practice, and that is also something that you would like to share and which would give you opportunity to publish. And of course, in the over 100 people who are present in this webinar, without a doubt, I'm sure there are many of you who have either completed research for high degree purposes or are currently engaged in research for high degree purposes. And on completion of that research, one of the things you do is that you publish. You've invested time, you've invested in energy, resources, etc., in that research. So you use those resources and embark on publishing. There's also the case of opportunities. You might get an invitation because of what you are currently involved in to publish, because you happen to be involved in an interesting area, or you've shown expertise. So that is an opportunity one should also embrace quite enthusiastically. Or you might be asked, invited to publish collaboratively, and the collaboration might come from within your institution, or it might come from outside your institution, from another institution in your own community, in your own country, and it might even come from a global source outside of your country. So these are opportunities that one should actually look to give you the opportunity to publish. Next slide, Clara. Thank you. So what is it then that can be published? I've already touched on one already. One is the completion of research for a high degree, and I think this is a very common source that individuals use to publish, but there's something we need to bear in mind. The fact that you've completed a thesis or a dissertation does not mean that you can take exactly that and submit it for publication. In a journal, for example. A journal is one venue for publication. What we need to bear in mind is that the dissertation, or what we call the big book in some parts of the world, has been prepared, it has been written for a very different purpose and for a very different audience. So one has to be cautious, and you have to, in a very discerning way, select aspects of that dissertation, rework it in terms of whatever publication you are targeting, so that it can be a standalone publication. So you might have been very successful in a dissertation, but it does not necessarily mean that an editor of a journal will accept something that you've cut out of your dissertation to have it published in the journal. It needs some work done on it, which I'm sure a number of you would appreciate, because you might have gone through that experience already. Also bear in mind that you may publish work in progress. And Clara and I would like to make, very emphatically say that one does not necessarily have to publish research associated with a higher education institution. You might be engaged in some kind of study that is workplace-based, and it might even be work that is still in progress. And one is encouraged to actually put that out in the public domain for evaluation. And one way of doing that is to publish, to seek sources to publish the work that you are currently engaged in. So publishing should be part of ongoing work that you are doing. You do not necessarily have to wait to complete a piece of work before you publish. You can publish work that is in progress. And the feedback that you get from from the peer review process, from the reviewers, from editors, all of that strengthens your work. So a positive outcome is not just eventually having something published, but it also impacts on your final product, whether that is something in the workplace or whether it is in the form of a journal article or some scholarly commentary. Feedback that you get from the people who look at your work, who evaluate your work and give you pointers on how to improve it is always something positive to embrace, look forward to, and welcome. An important point that I would like to make is that by publishing, you are placing your work, be it work-based work or research, you're putting it out in the public domain. And in the process, what that is doing is that it is putting you in dialogue with others in your field. You're able to have a wider conversation about the work that you are involved in. And that is a truly wonderful and enriching experience to have. And a last point that I would like to make on this particular, aspect of what can be published. While this particular engagement might be focusing on journal publication, and a lot of you might be interested in journal publication, remember we all have different strengths and strengths in different areas. You could, if one is not interested in, a journal article, there are book reviews, very respected publication and very welcomed by many journals. You might want to contribute to a column article. For example, Clara and myself contribute a column on international perspectives in College and Research Library News. And in the time that we've been involved in the column, we've really seen column contributors really achieve a sense of satisfaction after contributing to a column, and the contribution speaks to current events in the world impacting on our discipline, on our field. You might go to a conference, present a very successful paper, get feedback on it, come back, rework it, and send it to a journal as part of the contribution to that particular publication. And remember, there are things like insights and commentaries, letters to the editor. So there are a whole variety of opportunities for publication and not simply journal articles. So I've said a lot thus far. And so at this point, we would like to break for a little exercise. And Clara, maybe would you like to run the exercise?
Sure. So before we get started on the exercise, I saw a couple of hands raised. And so if we, should we go ahead and take those questions now, Jaya, or should we wait until later?
Maybe I'd like to suggest that we put it on hold for the Q&A session because we'd like to have quite a lengthy and rigorous Q&A session towards the end.
Wonderful.
If that's okay with our moderator?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I would prefer just to postpone our questions unless it's just for this exercise, but the whole question about the whole session, it's much better just to be at the end of the session. So we can just take the maximum and the advantage of the knowledge will be presented. Okay, is that okay with you, Clara?
Yes, that's wonderful. Please don't hesitate to write down your questions on a piece of paper or somewhere. And we will, if you have more than one, we welcome them all and we'll be able to address them later on in a rich discussion during the question and answer period. So then let's move to then our exercise. And so what we wanted to just see is, are you ready to be published now that we know a little bit about what that publishing process is? So now that we know why, when, what to publish, and who can publish, please type yes or no on chat if you feel that you're ready to publish. So I want to get a sense, and we like to get a good feel for. It's wonderful. So we're seeing many of you.
Everybody's ready.
Yes.
Most of everybody's ready. It's good.
And so
it's overwhelming, yes.
Yes. And a few of you who feel you're not quite ready, you're in good company, meaning that within this community of participants, you might be able to find yourself a collaborator. So wonderful. So thank you for that. And then, so we can see that whether you are early, mid, or in other stages of your career, that you can publish at any time, as we can see from the range of you. And so, but what is very critical is preparation. So preparation is a critical characteristic. So some of you may think, you know, maybe age or title or experience. But the more you're prepared, you may have the experience, but if you're not prepared, then your publication may not be as well researched, written, etc. And then one of the things to think about is whether you want to write and publish as a sole author or collaboratively. As it's indicated, we all would like to be published authors. And for those, as I indicated earlier, if you're not quite ready, there may be others that you can collaborate with. And now, if you would type on chat, what are some of your ideas? What are those topics? And we saw a few already shared. And so we would love to hear from you some of those great ideas or topics that and we read that one person had something published in College and Research Library News in March of 2021. Wonderful.
We're seeing some topics come up like authority control and institutional repository.
Yes.
Well, this is really kind of ready to go with publishing a group of participants that we have. And I'm sure participants are also looking at, you know, what people are putting onto chat. And so good opportunity to see who, what collaboration possibilities there are.
And
so Clara, yes, go ahead.
Oh, if we're starting to think about who might collaborate, I see that Vafa has indicated library services during the pandemic, and Stacy has indicated health information literacy. So speaking from the library trends perspective, we have issues that are unrelated topics. So this could be health information services that might be a grouping that could collaborate together and write your distinct articles. There's something on sentiment analysis that's really interesting and also appropriate to our current experiences, library instruction on Zoom.
And also, Clara and Jai, as you see that the pandemic and also coronavirus just make some momentum for the ideas that need to be published.
Absolutely. Okay, so while people are maybe putting their ideas for topics onto chat, that was a nice, you know, kind of, you know, break in the presentation. And let's go back to some of the serious business. And if you look at that, graphic, it really does depict a serious situation. Because we're looking at where and how to publish. And when we look at where to publish, one needs to actually understand the journal's market. And so, you know, the picture is one that reflects, you know, very traditionally, you know, our first prolific publishers came from the science domains, and, you know, you can see the lab coats, your scientists, and there's the target right at the end of the road for paper being accepted, but there's quite a gauntlet between the author and that target. So so in order to navigate that, what a lot, you know, a lot of us see as a difficult passage, let's unpack so we can kind of demystify this so-called difficult road to getting your paper published. Let's unpack and try and understand where we can publish and how to publish. So one needs to understand the journal's market, and in terms of how to publish, one needs to understand what makes a paper publishable. These are two very important aspects, so we will unpack it one at a time. So if we could look at the first one, understanding the journal's market. So if you're looking to publish, you've got to become familiar with the journals in your field. There might be many individuals who are present with us at the moment who probably understand this already, so please bear with us. But for those of you for whom this is novel, it is something new, you know, just allow us please to unpack it for you. So whatever you're involved in, whether it's something based at work or whether it's attached to a research degree that you are doing, you are working with a reference list of some sort, and a reference list is a very good place to start off with to try and see what is the conspectus of journals, of available journals in your field. And then, of course, in that reference list, you're going to come across certain core articles. And core articles are also a good place to see which are the dominant journals or the popular journals that people are publishing in. And so apart from your literature sources, you've also got colleagues at your workplace, you know, who have published, who have some experience in publishing. You could have a conversation with them to ask, you know, I'm starting out in this area. Do you have any suggestions about where I could publish? If you are attached to a higher education institution, you've got researchers, you've got mentors, you've got committee members. These are possible resources, you know, that you can reach out to try and work out what is the array of journals in your field. And then, of course, the source that we are all very familiar with and we kind of go to very quickly is the web, and where you see you know, you can use databases and search engines to try and source journals. Something that is very important to remember is that I suppose, like most things in life, there's also a hierarchy of journals. There are the well-established journals, been around for a long time, you know, attracting your high-quality papers, etc. So one also has to be practical. If you're a novice writer, you're not going to go for your prestigious journals in the first instance. You're going to maybe look at other journals, good journals that probably have a more encouraging approach to new authors, a very developmental focus, where the journal is prepared to spend time with you, to give you direction, to go through a range of drafts, and eventually to bring you to the stage of publication. Not all journals do that. So understand the array of journals, understand the hierarchy. And one concept, maybe some of us might view it as a controversial concept, and that is the concept of journal impact factor, because your journal impact factor is currently being used as that concept that reflects the hierarchy of journals in your discipline. Clara will explain a little more about journal impact factor when she talks about library trends, but for now I will simply say there are some journals with a high impact factor, and there are those journals with impact factors that are not so high. In other words, your impact factor is a numerical, it's a metric that reflects the kind of impact a journal has had in terms of citation and the way it has been used in other research and in other work. So understand the hierarchy of journals before you reach out to a particular journal. And in the next slides, you see I will explain to you why it's important to actually understand what a journal is about. Don't forget to consider open access journals. Open access has come, has come into the scholarly communication world in a very big way. There are open access journals that are of, great quality, so nothing stops you from reaching out to open access journals as well. Yes, Clara, the next slide, please. Thank you. Still on understanding the journals market, one needs to understand that different journals operate within different scopes. They have different areas of interest, different styles of presentation. They adopt different methodologies, and importantly, sometimes different theoretical and epistemological leanings. And it is very important when you are looking for a journal that you become familiar with these aspects of the journal. You have to understand the paradigm within which the journal is working before you actually decide to send your work to a journal. When we were having a conversation earlier on, Professor Abdullah was saying to us, one of the things that people would like to understand is why do their papers get rejected? And sometimes it has very little to do with the quality of your paper. Your paper might be of good quality, but it's not the proper fit for a journal because maybe the theoretical leaning of the journal is not suited to your work. So you need guidance in terms of going to a journal that is a better fit for you. Peruse the journals in your field. You find that journals have very detailed notes on what they are looking for from contributors, what their editorial policies are. Download exemplars of journal articles, read through the editorial policy, scan the articles, and so that you can come to a good understanding of the kind of journal that you want to target. And there's something that I need to say about language. We all automatically assume that we necessarily have to target an English language journal. There are some incredibly good journals in different parts of the world that are not written in English, but we all understand that particularly English is what gives accessibility, a broader, a wider global reach. So journals who publish in other languages might also offer translation facilities. So you might be able to, and you'll see we provided a list of languages in which journals could be published, but they could offer translation facilities, or if a journal is not resourced enough to offer the translation facility, they might say to you, when you are submitting a paper, make sure your title, your abstract, your keywords, the key metadata for your journal is in English, so that affords your content the opportunity to go out as widely as possible globally. Clara, I think I have one more slide on understanding the journal's market. You need to consider national interest and international interest. If your topic of study or your topic of research is something that is of interest to your local community, to your own country, then it would not be wise to target an international journal. But if it's something that is of international interest, then you may target an international journal. So one has to exercise a lot of discernment before you decide which journal you are targeting. And once you've decided on the journal that you are targeting, then you shape your paper in terms of the requirements of that journal. That is what gives you the greatest possible opportunity for success and in getting your paper accepted by that journal. You have to shape your paper in terms of the requirements of that journal. Okay. So we break now for another exercise.
Sure. So now that we have more information about what makes a paper publishable or what ideas you might submit, we'd like to now have you participate and type on chat your ideas of what would make a paper published. Originality, yes, that's a definite. We want to make sure that there's a contribution to the field.
Yeah, so newness coming out, and so glad this is coming out because we'll share our own thoughts with you just now, and you definitely on target.
Currency, novelty.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
honesty of results, that's an interesting point because ethics is also a part of
It should be it should be by default, I guess.
Yes. But sometimes we need to be reminded of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, sure.
And I like simplicity and effectiveness. Yes.
I like the serving the society or community, which is very, very good. It's aligned with what Jaya said, that the national and the international needs. So it's good.
Mm-hmm. And Ashraf has says powerful implications on community.
New perspectives is also, yeah, and relevance.
Currency again.
Yeah.
So we have lots of different ideas, and all of these characteristics are important. And as much as possible, we will want to make sure that we address all of these as we do our writing and submit for publication. So now we'll move from this exercise.
Thank you, Clara. So we didn't want to share this with you until we saw some of the ideas you put on chat. And I must say, it's very much on the mark, particularly around newness, clarity, a logical development of ideas. So now we're going to share with you from our experiences, both mine and Clara, in terms of working with journal articles, either as reviewers, as editors, as authors ourselves. What are some of the things that make a paper publishable? So the first thing that we would like to mention is that it should be well grounded in literature. One really puts an idea across in a publication without contextualizing it in terms of what has actually gone before, in terms of research or writing or sharing of ideas in that particular area. So for it to be well grounded in literature is very much a hallmark of a paper that would be publishable. Not all submissions for publication necessarily have to be empirically based. By empirically based, we mean you've gone out into the field and you've collected data. But if you have done that and that is a part of your paper, then you've got to make sure that the research methodology that you've used is sound. So you've got to look after that. We saw that on the chat. Your paper should address issues that are relevant to the field. Editors are very keen on relevance, and you seem to have worked that out already. We also saw on the chat the issue of being well written with carefully crafted and logical arguments. So there has to be a coherence in the way you actually present your paper. And before I go on in the next slide to elaborate on that, I'd like to say something about new knowledge. We saw on the chat a lot about innovation, new perspectives, etc. And journal publications particularly look for that newness. But that newness can come in many forms. It could be a significant finding, something that has not occurred before. It could be new insights into existing debates. So the debate has been going on for a long time, but new insights. For example, we've had pandemics. you know, in history, but there was something new about there's something new about the current one, and hence we see, you know, almost, you know, a rush of publications around the COVID-19 pandemic. New analyses of existing knowledge. So the knowledge has been there, but new analyses of it. A synthesis of the literature. You know, sometimes you don't even need to go out and look for into the field and collect data, etc. You can work with the literature and do a synthesis of the literature and produce something that is exciting and that can be shared you know, with your communities. And of course, there are theoretical developments. You know, for the esoteric amongst us, we might want to go to you know, for newness in terms of theoretical developments. So a little bit more in the next slide on what makes a paper publishable. And here we would like to differentiate between content and form. You know, sometimes we tend to look at a paper and we focus so much on what we put into the paper, we forget there's certain basic form that journals are looking for. So first, let's look at content. Your argument has to be logically structured, and I've mentioned that before. And then, but of course, you've got to bear in mind that the relationship between the argument and any data or evidence that you've gathered should be clear, because that is what your reviewer is going to be looking for as well. If you've collected data, the analysis of the data needs to be sound. Somebody on the chat indicated something about honesty and integrity in the way you present your data. And that is where the analysis comes in. So that's what we mean by sound analysis, taking into account all the research ethics that are necessary. If you are drawing your paper from theoretical sources, you've got to make sure that the theory is integrated into your research and it is used for good effect. It's kind of not sitting outside of your research. And of course, the most important thing to emphasize that all of what I've just mentioned has to be a proper fit for your targeted journal. You might spend a lot of time and energy going through all of this, but if it isn't a fit for the journal, you could possibly get rejected. And remember the point I made earlier on, papers are not necessarily rejected because of poor quality. They may also be rejected because it's not a fit for the journal. Very quickly in terms of form, here we look at things that we often take for granted. The abstract, you know, we think easy to present an abstract, but the abstract should reflect the contents of the paper. You've got to make sure that the prescribed house style of the journal is being followed. You know, being involved with Elsevier journals, you know, we often hear conversations that sometimes reviewers will see, okay, you've made 7 errors already and it doesn't comply with the house style of the journal, that immediately means rejection. So never take those things like capitalization, spelling conventions, punctuation for granted. Because when reviewers get tired of correcting that, then they stop and they simply reject. So those very basic things, make sure you get that correct. The length of the paper. If your journal asks for a paper of 5,000 to 7,000 words, they're not going to be happy if you turn in a paper of 12,000 words. The referencing style, look at what referencing style a journal is asking for and make sure you comply with that. The way you do your diagrams, your graphs, your tables, they should be clear, they should be of good quality, and they should be referred to in the text. So these very you know, obvious aspects of form are sometimes neglected and are often the cause of your paper being rejected. So one needs to pay attention to that. Next slide, please, Clara.
Okay, so now we're going to shift and take all of that knowledge and information that we have just shared with you and see how it is that we do our work within Library Trends. How do we publish? What does the article focus? What does the journal focus on, etc.? And so as we indicated earlier on in the presentation, we have just joined Jay and I as co-editors-in-chief to this particular journal that has been in publication since 1952. And so next year will be our 70th anniversary. And currently it's published quarterly by Johns Hopkins University Press. And so we consider the journal an essential resource for professional librarians and educators, and also others who may be interested in the field. And the focus of the journal is on critical trends in professional librarianship. So by librarianship, then we mean that we broadly focus on anything else that's related to the field. So if there are other areas that are related, we have also engaged in those. Then these particular trends focus on practical applications, thorough analyses, and literature reviews. And so it can be any of these. Then one of the unique aspects of Library Quarterly is that each issue covers in-depth, thoughtful articles that explore a specific topic. So all the particular articles in one issue will focus on the topic, whether it might be health information literacy, or it may be school librarianship or artificial intelligence in libraries. And these topics are professional interests from, it can range from specific types of libraries to emerging technologies. And so one of the things that's critical to ensure the quality of the journal and also the intellectual scope is the work that is done by different people on the team. And so as co-editors-in-chief new to the journal, we have decided to focus our vision on ensuring that it is global, inclusive, engaging, and accessible. So by accessible, we mean that we want to make sure that it is accessible to different parts of the world. And also, instead of a journal that's published, we are looking for new formats to be able to engage the audience in the journal itself and the content. The editorial board is also a particular group of people who cover the range of interests and areas of expertise that we want to address in the journal. And so they are there to serve purposes such as reviewing articles, giving us guidance on the scope and directions, and to hear some of the concerns that we may have. And so the editorial board also serves as an intellectual and quality oversight. Then we have the guest editors, and the guest editors are the ones that are responsible for a particular issue. They are involved in all the different aspects, and they also are the ones that ensure that there are reviews of all the articles that are published. And so reviewers are also involved. Then in the production end, there is the managing editor, Cindy Ashwell, and the production team at Johns Hopkins University Press. And in our case, we also have, as part of the production team, a graduate assistant, Jesse Williamson. And so with this particular group of people, then we ensure that we are reaching for the best intellectual output as well as quality. Earlier on, Jay had mentioned impact factor. And so what we wanted to share is where we stand as a journal. Of course, when we're looking at an impact factor, and here you can see for 2019, the one for library trends is 0.836. And we always look for an impact factor of 1 or better to reach that higher level of quality. And so these are some of the areas that we're also striving for in terms of quality. But one of the things to consider, if you look at the journals that are in the range of the field, which is information science and library science, then library trend stands at 63 out of 87. And what you will see if you look at the list and the impact factors of the top journals, they tend to be more focused on information science than they do in library science. So we had indicated that we have a focus on access. So the focus on access is to ensure that as much as possible, individuals can either access the print or the electronic copy. The electronic copy is available through different vendors. And more specifically, if you focus on the one repository, which is the Illinois Digital Repository, that's called IDEALS. If you wish to have access to past issues, they are available for free after 3 years. So you will be able to see all the ones that have been published except for the last 3 years. So that is a particular good resource for you to start to view them. And then if your library or you want to access them, then you can consider getting that access through vendors or a print subscription through the journal website. And the main language that we publish in is English. So we have made one exception, which is in the Spanish language. And so we were able to translate every single article, and there was the Spanish language and the English language versions that were published. But electronically, you can have access to both. And so this is something that was tested as a possibility with this particular issue, which focused on Cuban libraries and information issues. And so this is something that was done by a previous editor-in-chief and something that we can always enter into conversation and consider. In terms of topics, as we indicated, a particular issue focuses on the topic. And so the topics are developed in many ways. We value recommendations that are made from professional librarians, archivists, and other information personnel, and also from members of faculties of schools. And these schools can be in library and information science or any cognate fields such as education, for example. And then anyone else who has a concern on the issues of management of cultural heritage. And so we do look for volunteers. And if some of you wish to propose a topic and be considered as a guest editor, we would welcome that conversation and that communication with you. So how does one become a guest editor, and what are that person's responsibilities? So a guest editor would propose a theme and scope of a new issue. That person would also be responsible for drawing up a list of prospective authors and article topics, and also submit a call for submissions to the issue. And this can be if the guest editor wishes to do a call, a public call, but then they may also wish to gather the particular articles from maybe a conference that they were involved in, or they're already working with various colleagues in a research group that is international, and each particular group member has been focusing on different issues, and they might be contributing different aspects to the topic. The guest editor also has to arrange for a review of the manuscripts, and the guest editor also provides short annotations of each article's scope and prepares a statement of philosophy that will guide issue development. And so once the guest editor has many of these pieces in place, then they will submit a proposal with their CV. And the proposal should include nature and scope of the proposed topics and suggestions of names of individuals that they think will contribute to the article. And even though they may be submitting a call, they might be indicating some names just to give a sense and a range of the types of experiences, the types of expertise that might be coming into a particular issue. And so there are these 7 areas that would go into a proposal. And so I won't read them because once you're interested in doing this, then you can be looking at being more specific and following the guidelines. But what I wanted to identify is that 7th item, and which is the timeline. So we're typically looking at 12 to 14 months in terms of from proposal to publication. But one of the things we wish to note is that the current proposals that are being accepted this year will be scheduled to be published in 2023 or beyond. And so if you wish to look at the more specific responsibilities, then we refer you to guest editor responsibilities, the page on the website. So it's important to note then, if you do wish to publish in Library Trends, that as a journal, we don't accept single article submissions. So that means that what you would need to look for is either a call for submissions or work with a guest editor and be invited to be able to submit for publication. And so the preparation of a manuscript, should you be an author, is indicated on our website, and there are very good guidance and details there. Something that's very important when you're an author is that you communicate with your guest editor, the managing editor, and the Johns Hopkins University Press production staff. So as an author, you're going to be involved with communication with all of these individuals, but it's very critical you're always responding and ensuring that you are adhering to the timeline. The timeline is critical to ensure that the publication is published on a timely basis. Then what are some of the best practices that we recommend? The best practices for Library Trends, and one can think that these would be in some way applicable to other journals too, is that communication piece, that communication should happen throughout the whole process, not only to respond, but if you have a concern as an editor, or if you have a concern as an author, to ask questions, then you are able to move forward and proceed with publication. Adhering to the timeline is critical, so project and time management should be one of the skills that you manage. You also want to make sure that you observe guest editor and author guidelines and responsibilities and adhere to them. And it's very important that the writing is clear, that the evidence or data is provided as appropriate, and that you follow the style guide. And in this particular case is the Chicago Manual of Style, 17th edition. And one critical aspect is do not submit to more than one journal at a time. So in our particular case, if you do submit a call, respond to a call, then you should be submitting just to that particular opportunity and not be submitting your article to more than one journal at a time. So at this point, then we like to open it up for questions and answers and enjoy a rich discussion. And if there's time, we also like to share some information about the review process. But I think it's a good time to stop and hear from you, and for us to be able to address any questions or tackle any particular issues that you might have in mind.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Jaya, so much. I appreciate this comprehensive and very articulate presentation, like the approach that every researcher should do their work. If I just add elaborated point here, I think patient, that's what I can advise researcher, and also the people need to publish, because sometimes it's not about rejecting, it's about just being humble and being patient with the back and forth comment from the board, because sometimes that received as a process for rejection. I doubt this could be happening. It's something like they need to have the minimum level that accepted from the board. So the patient again, to be patient, this is a very important point. Okay, I try to pick some questions here, but I think I will start with the one related to library trends at the journal itself. So there is a question, if someone just needs to publish, how they can know the topic, because at each issue, I think there is some specific topic on the cover. So how they can know the upcoming issues, and this is one. The second one is this something changed from year to year? Please, Clara.
I'm not sure what so for each quarterly publication, then the topic is one that is suggested by a guest editor. And so this would have been decided a year and a half earlier. And so if you're to submit as a guest editor a particular issue on health information literacy, let's say, then you would submit the proposal. And then in some cases, if you already know that you want to work with a particular group of authors and they have already submitted their ideas, then you would submit that. However, if you want to issue a call because you want to open up to anyone who wants to submit on this topic, then that's also okay. So then each issue quarterly will be decided by a proposal that's submitted by a guest editor. I don't know if that
I think this is related also library tenants, which is I'm happy that they are focusing on this one, and we have both of you on this one. They need more elaboration on the term critical trends. What do you mean by critical trends here?
Mm-hmm. So as Jaya indicated earlier, critical could be something that is new, and therefore we need to take a look at and address it as soon as we can and learn about it. Critical could be that is something that is now very important, such as right now we're concerned about fake news and other elements of that type. Critical could be that it's important issue that we haven't yet addressed. So let's say we haven't had an issue that covered academic libraries at all. So then that would be a critical issue or trend, because lots of activities and lots of changes are happening in academic libraries, as an example. So I'll have Jaya elaborate some more.
And also related to that, one submission, the journal would not expect a kind of mundane description of a particular issue. Also critical in the sense of a nuanced positionality on a particular a topic or theme that is impacting on the field at that particular moment in time. Quite often submissions would come through, and you've got to try and assist the author to steer away from a simple description of what is happening in a particular work environment. One wants to see, as I'd indicated earlier, a nuanced view of what is going on with that particular topic.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Related to that, there is a question about the period of time of publishing the library trends. It's a quarterly. They asking if there is a specific reason for quarterly, especially if we are talking about a digital issue of it.
Clara, may I come in on this one, please? I spotted that while you were speaking. Would you mind if I took that question?
Yeah,
no, good.
That is such an important question, particularly that we are in a digital age, and with 4IR, etc. And I think it's Haider Ali who asked that question. Thank you very much for asking that question. And Haider, I think Clara and myself, as the new editors of the journal, a journal that has been around for almost 70 years now, and established itself in an age that was not digital, and hence evolved historically that way, where it comes out on a quarterly basis. But going forward, in a digital age, that is something that as editors, as the managing editor, as the editorial board, we need to actually look at quite seriously, because what you ask is actually very, very true. Why does one need to bunch, why do you have to bring all papers out in a single issue? Why not transition to the new concept of continuous publishing? Because journal content can now be published electronically. You don't have to wait, for March or May or August, etc. So that is something that we do need to look into. A lot of other journals have gone the continuous publishing route, but the one aspect that might make it difficult for a journal like Library Trends to take the path of continuous publishing is because authors do not submit individual papers. All papers are theme related. They are clustered around a theme. And the themes are usually worked out or lined up 2 and 3 years in advance. So that kind of very systematic scheduling becomes very important. But your question is an important one for journals generally. One does not have to stick anymore to, every 6 months or every quarter or every month. Papers can be published on a continuous basis. Thank you very much for that question, Haida. In the digital age, that is a very important question in terms of journal publication.
Thank you, Jaya, and thank you, Clara. There is also a question related to Library Trends about the period of time, or the average of time to accept the manuscript to be published. There is an average of the period of time.
Yes, so we had indicated for Library Trends, then it's a period of about a year and a half at this point. So the proposals are accepted in 2021, will be published in 2023 or beyond. But there is varied experiences with the different journals. And so some journals, there may be just a 12-month turnaround, but some might be 2 years or more. So I don't think that there are that many that are short turnaround, except for these ones that are publishing as, they receive the particular articles.
Perfect.
May I
yes, please, Jaya.
So let's leave Library Trends out of the picture for now, and to answer that question in terms of journals generally, that turnaround time, which is usually calculated on an average, can be anything between 4 weeks and 2 to 3 months. And journals strive to have as short a turnaround time as possible, but short doesn't necessarily mean good, because in a short turnaround time, you could be compromising rigor of peer review, quality of published content. So one shouldn't necessarily think, oh, if I can get a turnaround time of 2 weeks, that's great. But you could actually end up on the other end with poor content, or the quality of content could be reduced. So I think, if we're looking at some form of reliability, something between 4 weeks and 2 months would be a reasonable time in terms of turnaround time. That is from the time of sending in your paper and eventually getting it accepted and being published, particularly in the digital age now with continuous publishing, where you don't have to wait for an entire issue to be ready before you publish. So things are definitely changing in terms of the way journals, with journal management systems, and the way journal the production process is now being managed.
Perfect. Clara, do you need to add more for this point?
No.
Okay, so I just need to relate it because I'm clustering the question as much as I can, and this is the hard work for the moderator. I try to make it link it well. So I'm linking what you just say, Jaya, to the question just asking about the criteria to choose the journal. And I think that you already mentioned when you say the answer of where. So they need more elaboration on evaluating the journal that I need, or the researcher seeking to publish on it. So you spoke about the turnaround time or the period of time. What else the researcher should focus on when they pick the journal, in addition to the scope for sure?
Professor Abdullah, are you here? Is a question being asked in terms of what the reviewer is looking for, or what the journal is looking for?
The researchers, when they trying to select the journal, in addition to the scope and addition, what other criteria you can point it?
Clara, perhaps maybe we should just share a little bit of the slides on a review. I'm not sure, should we do that in terms of some of the criteria, or because I'm just trying to get clarity on the question. Are we looking for things like originality, Professor Abdullah, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, let me try to respond.
Go ahead, Clara.
Sure. So some of the considerations are the ones that Jaya indicated, which, if your language is only Arabic, for example, then English might not be an English journal may not. So then you would need to go and find someone that might be able to translate for you. And so the prestigious journal, do you want to go for that? And if you do, then it's good for your career. So then that means that you have to put more effort. If you are worried and you would like, this is your first article and you would like more support, then as indicated earlier, you might go for a good journal and where there would be guidance from the editor. The editor may be more open and have more time to be able to mentor you through that process and not worry so much. And so I think I will share maybe some, use myself as a case study. So I would be interested at this point in my career in publishing, as indicated by Lakshman, who is one of the attendees, in places that are not just our own peer-reviewed journals, but outside of our peer-reviewed journals, which is potentially in magazines or newspapers, to be able to make that impact. So, for example, many of us read Nature or Science, and they're very influential journals, but you don't often read anything related to the library and information field in those journals. So if I were to write an article on, fake news or racism in our field, that would be something that would be of broad interest and would make an impact of a contribution from our field. And I'm also interested, since I speak and read and write Spanish, to be able to publish outside of English. So then some of the work reaches another audience. And also since some of the work is related to this connection between practice and theory, then to write on the same topic, but for different audiences. So then you write more of the practical applications in one journal, and then in another one, then write about what is the theory behind some of this work. And so there are ways that you can take one project and make 5 articles out of it, or just write everything that is essential into one. So these are some of the, how I'm interpreting the question. How would one choose which journal to publish in?
Okay, thank you, Clara. Thank you, Jaya. We have a question here from Stephanie. Does Library Trends use Crossmark to ensure that article content can be revised and updated?
use cross switch.
Cross mark.
I'm not familiar.
I'm not familiar as well. It's related to the cross references, I guess. How they can, I think, Stephanie, if she can elaborate more, because she make a short question here. If we can just help her about the revising and evaluating process in library trends. Is it just sending to a reviewer, or there is specific process?
This is where now I think it's good opportunity to go into the review content, and then we'll come back to questions and answers.
Perfect.
Professor Abdullah, are you able to hear me? I see Clara's gone on mute.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I just had a little, I had a little bit of a sound issue. That's why I'm just verifying if you can.
We can hear very
so let's just
clearly.
spend a few. Yeah, great, thank you. So just a few minutes going through the review process. So thus far, what we've been putting forward is from, from the author side, and what you should do and what you should look at in terms of targeting a journal, and how you should the patience you should take in preparing your paper, etc. So let's pause a little bit and look at it from the other side in terms of the review process. And I'm surprised no one asked the question about double blind and single blind, unless maybe most people present understand what that concept means. So essentially, the review process, and good journals will always put their papers through a review process. And that process could be double blind or single blind. Double blind meaning that when the editor puts it out for review, the reviewer does not know the author of the paper, and the author of the paper does not know who is actually reviewing the paper. So that way, complete objectivity, integrity, etc. are maintained. But there are some disciplines that where single blind works. For example, if we take library trends, for example, there might be a particular issue where it doesn't necessarily have to be double blind. There are 10 papers in the issue, and the issue editor would probably just reach out to 2 or 3 reviewers, and they will review all the papers for that particular issue. So they know who the authors are, but the authors don't know who the reviewers are. So I just thought I'd differentiate between double blind and single blind. Both concepts are part of the peer review process. So after an editor looks at a submission, the editor will take a decision as to whether it should go out for review. And let's assume the editor, feels, yes, this particular paper qualifies to go out for review, so it is put out. It's put out for review. So what is the editor actually asking of the reviewer? The editor is asking to review the paper by a certain set of criteria, and to give an indication as to whether the paper is publishable or not. And you'll see on the screen at the moment, and participants might be interested in this, these are some of the criteria that reviewers, a journal will actually indicate these are the sets, the criteria. So in this way, there's a certain standard across all papers, being reviewed. These are the criteria by which, by means of which the papers are being reviewed. Is there originality? We saw a lot of that come up in the chat. Is there relevance? We saw that on the chat as well. Is it making a contribution to the field? If methodology is being applied, is a methodology sound? And remember, I did indicate earlier on, not all papers need to reflect methodology. What about structure and technical presentation? We spoke a lot about house styles of journals, and that you need to prepare your paper in terms of the house style. So you could be rated, or a narrative could be written on the structure and technical presentation of your paper, language usage and clarity. How readable is the paper? And then, of course, the reference technique, the citation formatting. How have you applied it? Is it consistent? Is it compliant with, for example, Library Trends uses the Chicago Manual of Style. Is it in keeping with that? And for me, this is, this slide here, it's important. It's important to understand who exactly is reviewing. Usually journals draw on experienced academics, on researchers, and also professional practitioners from the field. And then, of course, there's the question of how long does it take to review, the review process. It could be any time. It could be, any time between a few weeks and to 2 to 3 months. Remember, reviewers are often very difficult to source. What one needs to remember is that reviewers do not get paid for the work that they are doing. They do it out of, out of care, out of generosity, out of allegiance and loyalty to quality in the research that is coming out in that particular discipline. So sometimes they might take longer because they are busy. So, and a journal likes to look after its reviewers, so it does give reviewers flexibility of time, and that's why it's very difficult to say, you know what, it's just going to be 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It could take longer. And then, of course, once the editor receives the reviewer's comments, it becomes it's the prerogative of the editor to decide what's going to happen to your paper, depending on the comments that have been made by the reviewer. And you will get an outcome like, it's accepted with some revisions, or you might have to revise and resubmit for review, or complete rejection. And reputable journals do not simply harshly reject. They will reject, but they will give you very sound reasons for why they are rejecting. And if the journal cares about the author, the editor will also make suggestions on where else you can go if possibly your paper wasn't a fit for the journal. So in terms of quality and integrity of submission in the peer review process, once a decision has been made, as an author, you'll be informed. But of course, the editor will decide what aspects of the comments and the narrative from the reviewers will be shared with you. Sometimes it's very harsh. It could be harsh, and the editor will decide, well, that is too harsh. I'm not going to share it with the author because that might break the author's confidence. So it is very much the editor's role in looking after both the integrity of the journal as well as, the interests of the author as well. So whatever the outcome, and you can see on the slides, some reviewers can be quite bruising. As an author, you have to learn to deal with those comments, and you've got to try and embrace it as positively as you can to try and move your paper along so that it can get published eventually. Maybe not in that journal, but possibly in another journal, or maybe in a completely different platform, not a journal platform. What one needs to understand that very, very rarely is, and I think Clara and I here speak from experience, very rarely a paper is accepted without revisions. Even your most experienced authors would get revisions to their papers. So there's, I think if anybody says to you, I've never ever had a paper rejected, or I've had a paper accepted with no revisions required, I don't think those individuals are being entirely honest. All of us have experienced rejections, myself included. And I've never ever had a paper accepted where I didn't have to do revisions. And I'm sharing this with you so that, when you do get a paper back and it's got corrections to be done, you kind of don't say, oh, this is because, of my capacity in terms terms of writing, etc., look at it as an opportunity to learn and take your paper forward. Learn how to turn critical comments into helpful feedback. Use the feedback to try and eventually get your paper submitted. And some of the others are just pointers around timeline, which we already spoke about, and the review process. We might argue, and some of us might be frustrated by it and say that it's such a long drawn out process. But I think I can honestly say that, despite the digital age that we are currently located in, peer review still remains a key quality assurance process in the world of scholarly communication. And I think it is something that we need to embrace. We need to draw on it positively to build ourselves, as published authors, and to grow our publications records. I'm not sure, Clara, if there's anything else there to be shared.
No, that gives a really good sense for all of us in terms of how much work goes into a publication, that it's not just something, you decide to do one day and then the next day you're a published author. So it's a responsibility not only from the author side, but from the publisher side and all of those who are engaged in the reviewing process. So what does this look like then for library trends? And so the review process for library trends is a little bit different, but it's also engages this kind of rigor to ensure the quality. And the responsibility is that of the guest editor. And the guest editor is ensuring that they work closely with the authors. And so they are the ones that identify who the reviewers are and also what that process will be. And so unlike other journals where the editor-in-chief, and that would be the case of Jan and myself as co-editors, that if it was another journal, we would be involved in ensuring that we identify the reviewers and the review process takes place. However, in the case of library trends, that responsibility is that of the guest editor, and as editors-in-chief, Jan and I would provide guidance in this process. And so something that happens then is that depending on the guest editor, they may do the traditional review process, or they may use a process where they are also supportive and help along with interpreting the review, ensuring that the concerns are addressed by the author and supports that author in making any revisions that are necessary. And so when we're thinking about the peer review process, then these particular resources are helpful because they give more specificity and go beyond the information that we've shared. They come from specific resources. The first one are guidelines for reviewers that talk about responsibility and what that review is. And that review also includes ethical aspects. The reviewer might also be looking at issues such as, have they seen, something very similar before? Are they citing people that, have not been cited properly because they maybe know of that particular publication, or maybe they have missed citing certain people. The second resource is a very specific checklist, and they emphasize what the criteria might be for research articles versus non-research articles. And then for the PLOS, or Public Library of Science, peer review process, this particular set of journals that are published by PLOS, then you can be part of a community of the peer review process. That means that if you submit a review for one of their journals, you can submit for your review to enter into the broader community of reviews. And so if somebody maybe decides to not publish with your particular journal and then submits it to another PLOS journal, then that review will follow that particular article. And so there is more of a network and community process there. And so we wanted to talk also that there's an opportunity for those of you who have experience and knowledge in particular areas that you can be a reviewer. So if you're not quite ready to publish, then you might consider yourself a reviewer. And either you might be approached by an editor, or if you would be interested in reviewing, you can always contact the editor and indicate that you're always open for these kinds of opportunities. And why would you review? Because you want to support the review process. Also, you want to gain experience, maybe gain experience in the publishing process, understand how it works, and then get ready for publishing yourself. It also gives the opportunity to see the latest in research. You would get to see recent research that has been conducted. You'll also be able to learn about different styles in terms of the way that research might be done or the way that people write. And then, of course, you're serving the scholarly or professional community when you're doing the reviewing process. So we thought that we would share those particular aspects regarding the review process, which contributes to the quality in writing and publishing. So with that, we want to maybe continue and see if there are any more questions before we conclude. And I see that there are quite a lot more. And maybe if I can pick it up from here, I see one question that is, do special issues ever evolve into monographs or series? So in the case of library trends, then each issue is considered to be a thematic one or a special issue, if we want to use that terminology. It does not evolve into a monograph or a series. I know that some journals do this, meaning that they will publish as a journal issue, and then they take that same content and repackage it into a monograph series. And so they're able to publish it, the same content, but in two different formats. But that's not something that is done by Library Trends. And then I also see that there is a question by Helen Emisalu, and she is saying that, hello Helen, that what is the current theme for the for this quarter? So if I can get Jaya to help out with that one, and have her look to see what some of the upcoming issue topics.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind immediately and that we're currently working on to bring out in the summer is on fashion in libraries or fashion librarianship. You know, the editor here, the editors or the guest editors are located in a university environment, which and I think the university has a department of fashion, and so you know, the students in the fashion discipline have impacted on the service that is offered by that particular academic library. And I think that is how the editors were inspired to come up with an issue on fashion librarianship. So that is the one that is currently being worked on. Clara, are you you know, also interested in citing some of the other titles? Clara, would you like for us to share that as well?
Sure.
With the registrants? Yes, if you can just give me a minute. Yes, so the one that is currently almost in, you know, kind of in press and will be coming out very soon is one on the intersections of research and public librarianship. the one coming out in the summer, which is August 2021. I mentioned that already, Fashion in the Library. And the fall issue, November 2021, is on family matters, mapping information phenomena within the context of the family. And then in 2022, the winter issue coming out in February 2022, economics and cost efficiency of academic libraries. And in spring of 2022, an issue on the joy of information. And in the summer of 2022, information media and news literacy in a time of mis and disinformation. And I think that is as far as we go in terms of the lining up of the issues. Yes, and of course, something very special to look forward to, and we kind of reserving an issue for it, is in 2022, Library Trends celebrates its 70th anniversary. So, you know, there are plans for special anniversary issue. And that is as far as we go in terms of issues that are coming up in the near future.
Okay, great. So I think there's a question here that I'm picking up from Gigi Mohammed, and she's asking whether we recommend publishing solo or collaboratively, and what the advantages and disadvantages of each. So Jia, do you want to get started, and then I can fill in with anything else?
So I'm assuming here the colleague wants to know if Library Trends would ever publish individual articles out of a special issue format. Is that what is being asked?
No, just in general, like whether if somebody is interested in writing and publishing, whether they should kind of do it on their own or.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Yes, in fact, you know, my advice often is that if one is starting out, it's always useful to work collaboratively. That way you kind of, you know, you share the responsibilities of the publishing, you know, or the preparation, you know, you divide up the work, etc. And it's always nice to have collaboration when you're doing it for the first time, and after you become more accustomed to it, you develop the confidence to actually publish on your own. That is one advantage of publishing collaboratively. The other advantage of publishing collaboratively is you might have a group of people working in a particular area and would want to share their different sets of expertise, knowledge, skill sets, etc. And together that would make a very interesting paper. So from a resource point of view, collaborative publishing there would be useful. And then of course, you know, and here, Clara, you know, you might be able to come in, you know, around issues of tenure, for example, if you're publishing, if you're an academic, and around issues of tenure. So you've also got to be careful of the fact that you do not do too much collaborative publishing and too little, you know, sole author publishing, because, you know, your tenure conditions are looking for certain forms of publishing. I mean, it's a system that is not prevalent in my part of the world, but maybe Clara can elaborate a little bit on that.
Right. I think that for those who are in a tenure track system, and many of us are in that in Canada and North America, then this issue of what is your voice, you know, how are you contributing and how are you a leader in a particular research field? So publishing on one's own is considered to be important, but also think about what it is that is your own individual voice, but then think about how you also are able to add to the field when you are engaged with other people. So single authorship is important, but then don't overlook collaboratively. So some things lend themselves to single authorship also, while others lend themselves more to collaboratively. And so whatever organization, university you're in, then that might dictate a particular approach that you have. And so think about what it is that is expected at your own institution and try to address it. But there are particular reasons why you might publish on your own or publish with others. And something to think about also is who do you collaborate with, because that's also critical in the tenure process. If you are collaborating with your thesis or dissertation advisor, then it's often looked at as if you don't also have your voice, because that means that you're relying on a senior scholar and publishing with them. Rather than the other way, that actually the senior scholar is relying on you with your new perspectives and your new knowledge. And so all of these things are just different aspects to consider. There's no right or wrong. Just be aware of what is valued, and if some particular ways to approach writing and publishing are valued, then consider whether that is to your benefit or not. So I'll turn it back to Mohammed. Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Abdallah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for you. I'm just confirming about that. It was very, very important, especially here in the Arab region, about that tenure track, the concept. It's sometimes very important to the researcher, because they thought about that their efforts in a collaborative work could affect their position. As you said, that let me hear your voice, let me see your characteristics of the topic that you are dealing with. Again, if you just pick another question that we have here, question related to okay, here we go. We passed. There is many questions already. You already touched during your presentation, but there is a question about how to distinguish between the real and fake magazine that many people are fooled about. I don't know how the fake magazine, but maybe we can rephrase it on how to compare with the journal that could give added value for the researcher comparing with others. Could be not as good as he expected. I think we mentioned this criteria that Jaya, right? You talk about that clearly, yes. So we have here, yes, about the case studies, the articles that in the method of case studies, do you think that it's less likely for the journal? They don't welcoming so much this type of articles, case study articles, comparing with the other type of articles that having some benchmarking or comparison studies or field work?
They're just as valid. I think it depends on which journal you want to submit to. As long as the work was done in a rigorous way and there's critical analysis and interpretation and thinking behind it. If the case is mainly writing up and describing, what some of the findings and results, and it's not very critical, then it won't have the same kind of positive review.
Thank you. I think we cover most of the questions. Clara, do you see? Yeah, please go ahead.
I'd like to pick one up where Jaya's expertise can come in. The question is how to evaluate journals. Do we always have to look at indexes and whether it is indexed in Scopus, Web of Science, etc.? What does it mean when the journal is not indexed there?
So it's the whole idea of the hierarchy of journals that I mentioned earlier on. There are various lists within countries across the world. The famous ones being Scopus and Web of Science, and often there's a belief that if a journal does not sit on one of these lists, then it is not a journal to submit an article to. That is not necessarily true. Some journals have been around for a long time. This is where we differentiate between journals from the global north and the global south. Journals from the global north have had resource advantages over the years, and they've been able to get themselves onto these lists. And there's also a belief that there's sometimes unfair assumptions that if a journal is produced in Africa, for example, or in some other part of the developing world, it doesn't necessarily match the quality of a journal that has developed in the global north. And you will find that there's a distinct imbalance when you look at these big lists, the Scopus lists, the Web of Science, etc. They tend to have largely journals from the global north. And then it leaves countries in the global south with journals where people tend not to aspire to publish in them. But there's definitely been a paradigm shift, with time, increased recognition that there are really worthy publications sitting in many regions of the world that are neglected and that individuals are not looking to them to publish. So, this was the point I was making earlier on, where I said, when you're publishing, and particularly if you're a novice author, don't necessarily look at one of your big titles necessarily coming out of the global north and maybe even in the English language. You might want to look at a good journal published somewhere else in the world, might not necessarily be on one of these elite lists of journals, but could still disseminate your research and put your research out in the public domain for conversation around the area that you are working on. I do serve on the Scopus board, so I am able to say that the thinking around the lists are definitely changing. There is big encouragement to look at journals from all over the world, and quite often we see that sometimes there are journals from the global south reflecting better quality, not on these lists, and yet there are journals from other parts, developed parts of the world, who do show some compromise in quality, but have managed to get themselves onto the list. So in short, to answer that question, Clara, lists, indexes, etc., are not a foolproof way of judging quality of journals. I think if you are really making yourself familiar with the journals in your field, you are watching them carefully, you are reading them, you are looking at them, you are looking at the authors, you are looking at who is publishing where, you will be able to work out a useful journal that you can target for your publication. It's part of that whole part that Clara and I emphasized on understanding the journal market. And you do not necessarily have to go for a listed journal.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jaya. Clara, would you just...
Yeah, I was going to
yes,
introduce
please.
Another question, unless you have another one that...
No, go ahead.
One of the things that Jay and I always appreciate is that everybody brings something to the table. And so there was this question from Haider Ali that said they would like to see if there can be an international LIS research group under the leadership of Jay and myself. And I think that this is more an opportunity for everyone in the that's participating to offer something to the table. So I'm wondering if it would be okay for Haider to be able to unmute and speak and share the particular thoughts. What would be an LIS research group, and there may be others that are participating who would like to volunteer to lead it, because all of us have something to offer.
Perfect. Mr. Haider, please. We can't hear you. I already unmuted you.
Oh,
yes.
No.
Hello, good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
And might be in some part we have still the morning, maybe. So good morning to the people who has the morning. So I'd love to lead this LIS group, international, the collaboration. So if there are some opportunities, and Naseej is I work with the Naseej in a sense that we have implemented many things in our libraries in Saudi Arabia. So if Naseej can help us in this regard to collaborate with other people, especially in the Gulf region, or definitely if we can have a bridge between the Gulf and other countries internationally, especially in America, North America, Europe, or South Africa, wherever. So it will be a great opportunity, all of us, especially the LIS professionals, because we don't have many resources or many opportunities to work together. So I'd love to lead this group under the, the leadership of international professors like Dr. Gia and Clara. And this Naseej is a great opportunity. They are helping LIS professionals all around the world. So if they can support this noble cause, I love to lead this group.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, if I just can talk on behalf of Naseej Academy, we are welcoming about the idea to have this such promising group, and for sure, one of our goal in Naseej Academy just to foster and encourage such groups, just to have a very valid and also valuable outcomes from sharing knowledge, and also raising ideas that could help the whole community this one. If you can elaborate, Clara and Jaya, on this, please go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So I think from our end, if there are particular interest, we are open to listening to what those possibilities are. And as I indicated earlier, we don't always need to be the ones to lead. There is a lot of leadership within the community. And so I think if it's more how to create a process, so there can be support and there can be motivation and connections made along research, we would be happy to contribute to that process.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Haider, for this interesting. Clara, I think you have something and some slides also you need to add related to the, yes, this is the best. You always leave the best to at the end. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that although there are other questions, we can, if you wish to write and ask us anything that we may not have covered, we would be happy to respond. But I would like to just conclude by thanking everyone, and this has been an enriching discussion. I am so happy about so much interest in publishing, and I look forward to hearing all of those particular publications being out there so we have a chance to read them. And then we also have an opportunity from library trends that Jaya will share with us.
you'll see it projected on the screen in front of you, where participants in in this webinar. If you're associated with an institution and you would like to subscribe to the journal for participants in this webinar, there would be a 20% discount. It's an offer being made by the publishers. And in the interest of dissemination of content of what we would like to think is a journal with good critical content, this is an opportunity to try and encourage the distribution of the journal to other parts of the world besides the North American region.
Mm-hmm. Great. So,
Perfect. Yes.
Dr. Abdullah, there were, I guess, a question about the slides and our certificate. So
Yes.
maybe you can conclude with that. And then Jay and I, we just appreciate the opportunity that Naseej and the Mortenson Center have provided for us to be able to share some of our knowledge and experiences.
Thank you, Clara, so much. And Jaya, I think this is a very interesting opportunity, and it's built on the strategic partnership with Mortenson, and also the long relation related between Naseej Academy and also University of Illinois. And I think it's very important for all the attendees here to know that this is not just a one-shot webinar. We keep communicating with expertise and professors like Clara and Jaya, just to share their knowledge, share the new trends, and make again Naseej Academy the window that you can look at the new wave we can see in our field. The content of the presentation will be uploaded to both Mortenson and also Naseej Academy website, and all the attendees will receive attendance certificate signed by us. And also we are encouraging you to send us over the email all the questions that we couldn't answer. We have a flow of questions, but because we need to stick to the time that we already identified. Thank you again for everybody, and I would like to confirm my deeply thanks for Professor Clara and Professor Jaya, and for sure we will have them again in a new knowledge and ideas and ways with this one. Thank you for everybody, and have a wonderful day for the people who are attending across the ocean, and have a wonderful night for the people in the Middle East. Thank you for everybody. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Jaya. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So okay.
Thank you, Abdullah, and thank you,
Take care.
participants.